Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. We'll try to talk loud too. So. Stop us if like it's going in and out or something. Yeah. Okay, so my name is Jessica. I'm going to get us started off with our money basics. And we have a lot to go through today, but hopefully you guys will find it all interesting. So let's start with, where do you folks keep your money? So typically it'll be a bank or a credit union, or hopefully not under your mattress or buried in the backyard or something like that. But banks and credit unions, I just wanted to go over real quick. A lot of people don't know the difference between the two. So the main difference is that banks are for-profit institutions, whereas credit unions are non-profit. So banks, they're going to sell stocks in their company. So they have shareholders. And when banks make money, they have to pay out these shareholders. So these shareholders make profit off of the bank. But credit unions, because they're non-profit, our profits go back to our members. And they go back to our members in the form of lower loan rates, usually higher savings rates, and you'll see a lot less fees. So credit unions will usually offer most products and services for free, whereas banks, you'll notice, will charge fees for a lot of different services. So when you're looking for a financial institution to keep your money in, you want to think about what products or services that you are going to need to manage your own finances. So, of course, you're going to look for your savings account, your checking account. Some places have money manager accounts, and those are, if you have some savings that you want to earn usually a little bit of a higher interest rate on, then you can put your funds in a money manager account. And they have rules, like maybe you can withdraw only certain amounts at a time, things like that. But it's for when you have more savings that you want to hold on to. Share certificate, that's also when you lock in your funds, savings for maybe like a year, 2 years, whatever the term is, and you can earn more interest on that as well. You also want to look at where the ATM locations are for the institution that you are with. So for example, at HFS, all of our cards work with the Bank of Hawaii network, which is the largest ATM network in the state. So it's usually pretty easy to find an ATM nearby. So when we do presentations at the university here on the Big Island, we like to mention to the students that there's an ATM on campus. So you want to look for something that's nearby to you in case you need to get cash that is convenient. Will you be looking for e-statements? So maybe you don't want to get them in the mail, you want everything by email. So online banking is very important in that case. Do they have mobile banking apps? Do they have mobile deposit? So if you get checks, you'll be able to deposit from your app without having to go into a branch. And then, of course, debit cards, credit cards, any other loan products you might be looking for, and convenient branch locations. You don't have to travel too far to visit a branch for your money. And sometimes for the branch locations, it may not be as big of a deal for you, depending on how you're going to use your institution. There are certain places that are online only, or there's some that have a combination of the two, and depending maybe how you have to open up your account, you might have to come into a branch to do that. For other places, you can do it all online. So that one, it's really how you think that you're going to be managing your money. Okay, so a little bit more about the savings account, checking account, and some of the different cards. So if you have a savings account, just a savings account, you can get what's called a share card. And that will allow you to take cash out at an ATM directly from your savings. If you have a checking account, of course, you can get a debit card that you can use for spending at the stores. You can take cash out at an ATM, and that's linked directly to the funds in your checking account. And then we have credit cards. So real quick, just to mention, we've done presentations before where the students don't realize that credit cards are in fact loans. We want to make sure that everybody understands that credit cards are borrowed money. So when you spend on a credit card, you have to pay it back. And we'll talk about credit a little more towards the end of the presentation, but just we want to drive home the point that credit cards are loans and debit cards, that's your own money that you're spending from your checking account. So your savings account, that's going to be an account that you're holding onto your funds. You're saving that for a rainy day or to hopefully not have to spend it. That's kind of just your extra. you don't want to be taking money out from your savings often if you don't have to. And then your checking account, that's your transactional account. So that's the account you're going to pay bills from, you'll do all your spending from. So there'll be more money going in and out from your checking versus your savings. Okay. So when you go into a financial institution to open an account, these are some of the things that you'll need, and I'll go through it. But just know that it's going to vary based on the institution that you go to. But these ones that I'm going to talk about here is what we require at HFS. So first, you're going to have your minimum deposit, and that's going to vary between institutions. For us, it's $50 for a savings account. That's the minimum that you have to keep in your account at all times. So you're going to need that to open the savings account. You'll always start with a savings. And then because we're a credit union, and as I mentioned, when you become a member, you're basically like an owner. You have a share in the credit union. So there's a membership fee, and for us, it's just $1 one-time membership fee. You just pay that when you open your account, and you never have to pay that again. Once a member, always a member. You'll have to have photo ID, so usually that's like your driver's license, your state ID, or a passport, something official with your photo on it. And then we also ask for proof of address. So because we're a credit union and we are open to people that live, work, volunteer, have some kind of tie to the Big Island, so we ask for proof of address. And that can be like a utility bill or something showing your address on it that was mailed to you. We'll ask for social security number. You don't have to have your card as long as you know your number, that's perfect. And then as I said, it always starts with a savings. But as you open the account, whether it's online or in person, then you can add on from there. So you open your savings, and then you can ask about opening a checking, getting a debit card, and any other products or services that you might be looking for. Okay, so here's an example of a check. And I'm just going to go through the pictures first, just so we see where everything is and how to actually write the check. So up at the top where I have circled 1090, that is your check number. So each check has a unique number, and that'll help you. So say you see on your statement that check number 1090 cleared, but you forget what it was for. You can go back in your checkbook, look for that number, and you'll have a carbon copy of your check, which will show you what you wrote it out to. You have your date, and we have today's date on there. And then where you see the pay to the order of line, so we just put AT&T in there, for example. That could be whatever you're writing the check for. But notice that I drew a line after I wrote AT&T. Okay, so this is really, really important, because if you don't draw that line, and say I'm taking this check to AT&T, but I drop it on the way there, and someone picks it up. If I didn't draw the line, they can go ahead and write in or and their name, take it to a bank and cash it. Okay, so if you draw that line, you're basically taking up all that room so that if you lose this check, no one else can go and write in something else. Okay, then you have your dollar amount. This one was for $300. That's the numerical form. And then below that, you're going to write it out in words. So $300 and no cents, 0 cents. And again, draw the line so nobody can add anything in there. And then down on the bottom where it says purpose, this is more for your tracking, so you remember what you wrote the check for. So this was for our phone bill. And then the next line over is the signature line. If you don't sign your check, they won't be able to cash it or deposit it. Okay? Down at the bottom, where all those numbers are circled, these are really important numbers, and it's one of the reasons why you want to make sure you keep your check safe. So all the way to the left, where all those zeros are, that's your routing number. And a routing number is unique to your financial institution. So for example, if you have a job and you want to get direct deposit, they're going to ask you for your routing number, account number, things like that. So the next number is over, the 124, those numbers, that's your account number. So whatever your account number is, that's where it's going to be listed. And then the next number over is your check number. So if you notice, your account number and your routing number are on these checks, and those are numbers you want to keep safe. Okay, so if you have checks, make sure you always know where they are. If your checks are stolen or lost, you want to make sure you report it immediately. so that nobody can use those, because they would be taking funds directly from your checking account if they do try to deposit or cash any checks. So as I mentioned, the tips to avoid check fraud, drawing those lines so people can't fix them up and write anything in. And then also make sure you never give out a blank check. So once you put your signature on that check, even if nothing else is written in, it's going to be a valid check to be able to deposit. So if I give Ashley a blank check and tell her, oh, go ahead and write whatever amount in you need for whatever reason, she could go in and write in however many thousands of dollars she wants and deposit that check because I signed it. So don't sign your check until you're ready. Okay? And then one thing I want to mention, because this does trip up a lot of people when it comes to managing finances, especially if you use online banking. So, for example, when you use a debit card, a lot of times even if the transaction doesn't go through yet, on your online banking, you'll have your available balance versus your actual balance. So if the transaction hasn't gone through, your available balance will show that there's a transaction that hasn't gone through yet. This is how much money you have. When you write a check, it's not going to come out of your account until they actually deposit it. So if you forget that you wrote the check and they don't deposit it till 2 weeks later, and you don't have the funds, then you could trouble. So what we suggest is tracking with like a register or something where you have your balance when you write the check already subtracted out. Okay, that way you're not waiting until the check is deposited and you forgot all about it, because it does happen. And then on the back of the check, that bottom picture, that's where you would endorse if you were depositing a check. You sign and take that to the teller. Positive. Yeah.
So before we move on to the next set, we'll just kind of stop here and see if anybody has questions about types of accounts, debit cards, and checks. So we'll stop, and then if there's no questions, we'll move on to budgeting.
I have a quick question. So what's the minimum age to open an account with? I think credit unions, you can be a little bit younger, if I'm not mistaken, versus a bank. Since we have some of our students, I think all of our students are old enough to have an account at a credit union, but I think your input would be good too, just in case they're thinking about it. They might be starting their first part-time job or something.
Yeah, so usually, well, it depends. So like I had my account opened for me at a credit union when I was like born. my grandma opened my account, so I've had this account ever since. So different institutions may have different programs and types of accounts. So like at HFS, we have a kids club account, which you can be just born to get it. And the features are a little bit different because obviously you're going to need different sets of products rather than like if you were going to college. But for kids club accounts, for us, you have to be 17 or younger. And instead of that $50 minimum deposit, it's a $5 minimum deposit. And then if because you could be like, 15, 16, maybe have a job and maybe want a debit card on top of that, you can add those products in, but you're gonna need to make sure that there's a joint owner, so like an adult.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a parent, but it should be somebody that you trust, because whoever's a joint member on your account technically has equal rights to the money and the funds in there. They can close the account, they can add products, they have equal rights that you do. So I wouldn't suggest you get like a boyfriend or like a best friend to be on the account. Get an adult.
Good word of advice. And smart. Because I think you think, oh, there's no strings attached, and then things happen.
Right.
Yeah. I think that was also, do you have any tips? Like, let's say we have a student, as an example, that wants to open their checking account. Is there like a minimum amount you think they should like work to like keep in there, or like little tips on like getting started of just how to start putting money in there, like try and put in like $10 every month or $20 every month?
Well, first of all, for the checking account, depending on if you go to a bank or credit union, or actually just depending on whichever institution you go to, you should see if there is a required minimum balance to have a checking account. Some banks usually will have like stipulations, like you need to have $500 in your checking account at all times, or they'll assess you a $5 or $10 monthly fee. So for kids, usually I suggest that you find something that doesn't have that stipulation. So like for HFS, for example, there's no minimum requirement for a checking account. Obviously, you can't be negative, but you don't have to keep a certain amount in there. And a lot of the time, kids aren't going to have, that larger amount that's required. So you got to really take a look at the rules, I guess, on that particular account. Some of them require you to make a certain number of transactions every month. Just really got to look. But as far as putting in money,
I think it's more like what you're comfortable with based on your finances. Because you can put in as much or as little as you want at any time. So it's always good to, personally, I keep a cushion in my checking at all times in case there's something that I forgot about that comes out, like I don't know, like a bill or something, and I forget. So
yes,
I would recommend keeping as much of a cushion as you can in there, and know, okay, I'm going to spend until I get to this point, and then I'm not going to spend anymore.
Okay.
But as far as putting money in, as much as you are comfortable with.
And keep in mind too, like the use of a checking account is different from a use of a savings account. The checking account is used for you to buy stuff. That's what we call a transactional account. So money goes in, money goes out. Your paycheck will probably go into the checking account because that's where you're going to be spending money. But your savings account, that's where you toss the money that you don't want to touch. For me personally, if I keep all of my extra money in my checking account, I'm just going to spend it, right? Because it's just so easy.
Exactly.
Yeah. But if you move it over to a savings account, it takes an extra step for you to have to go and take it out. So it's just, I feel like it's a little bit more safer that I'm not going to touch it if I move that money to a savings.
And we had a question from Jasmine. Thank you, Jasmine, for chatting in your question. We encourage you students to do that if you're too shy to talk. It's okay. So Jasmine asked, can you please explain what a share card is?
Sure. So the share card is attached to your savings account. So that allows you to be able to use an ATM if you want to take out cash from your savings. But I think that's pretty much the only way you can use the share card is on an ATM. But it's directly.
So you can't use the share card at Starbucks or something to pay for your drink. Okay.
No. So usually what we see parents do is, if they're just getting their child into dipping their toe into managing their own money, usually they'll start with a share card, which they can only touch money that's in their savings and go to an ATM. It kind of limits your, I guess,
and how much you can get into trouble with it.
So a lot of them start off with a share card, and then once they can prove that they can be responsible with that, then they can move on to getting a checking account and a debit card, which then you can use that card at Target or Starbucks or online to buy things. So it's usually a stepping stone product.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing else?
Not yet. We'll see. Maybe the next section on budgeting.
Okay. So budgeting is simple math. I like to say that because obviously you need to spend less money than you make, right? If you do the opposite, then you have a problem. But I like to think of budgeting there's an additional component in there. There's an emotional attachment because it's so easy, I think, to overspend when you think about, I teach a junior achievement for kindergartners, and we start off by showing them like the difference between needs and wants. And a lot of times I think when we get to, high school age or college age, the line kind of blurs a little bit. A lot of people, they need their morning coffee at Starbucks, but really that's a want because you could just get your own coffee at home. So there's an emotional attachment to it. But basically, there are two reasons why you budget, usually. One is because you want to make sure that you have enough money to pay your bills. And the other is maybe you have some kind of goal that you want to reach. So most people fall into the first bracket. You just want to make sure that you're able to cover your monthly expenses. But like I mentioned, there's that emotional component to it. So it takes some effort on your part and willpower as well to stick to your budget and actually to be honest with yourself on how you spend your money. So the first thing that I really encourage people to do is, figure out what your reason is, because it just helps you stay on track a little bit better. But the first thing that you have to figure out is your goal, so your reason. And it can be a short, medium, or long-term goal. And this can range from, a short-term goal may be creating a savings fund for Christmas presents. So some people, they'll start saving in January a little bit of money every month. And then when it comes to the fall, maybe October, November, they have a really nice nest egg of money that they can use to buy Christmas presents, as opposed to waiting until November and then kind of whatever money you have at the time is what you have. So that might be a short-term goal. A medium might be buying a car. It might take a few years to save up a down payment, but it's a little bit longer period. And then a long-term goal is more like buying a house, saving for retirement. Those things take years to really accumulate. So depending on what kind of goal you have, it'll determine how long you're going to have to plan for. So the first thing that you're going to do is set your priorities, know your why, so figure out what that is. And then you're going to have to create a spending plan or a budget, basically. And then you're going to have to implement the changes, but this is an ongoing process. You just don't do it 1 month and then call it quits. You make changes, you reevaluate, then you try again, and you might have to do that a couple times until you really get into a good rhythm. But it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. So just a quick example. I know for high school students, sometimes it's hard to grasp, why do I got a budget? But to make it real for you in a few years, or maybe even a year, when you go into college, most people are going to get financial aid or scholarships or loan money, and that money has to last you for the year, right? I think they give you a amount up front in the fall and then an amount in the spring. So if you want, you can kind of think of that by semester. You need to budget by semester. And that money that you get needs to last you for 3-4 months. And it needs to be able to include your tuition and your fees. If you're dorming, then include that. But if not, then you got to think about rent and utilities and food. If you have a car, gas, car insurance. And then for me, when I was in college, I had a dog. So I also had to budget in grooming expenses for her. So it's very relevant for high school students to start thinking about this now, because the last thing that you want to do is be well into college and then trying to figure this out as you go. If you can kind of pre-plan, that really does help. And then the other thing that I want to mention before we go into this, because we did talk about the difference between putting money into your savings account versus a checking account, is if saving is a goal for you and that's one of your priorities, you've got to treat that as an expense. Because we said we put all of our money into the checking account, and if you have a savings goal to save, let's just say $100 a month, you got to make sure that that is a line item in your budget and move that money over to your savings $100 a month so that you don't just leave it there and then accidentally spend it. So this is how you do it. You basically have two options. You can decide it's almost May, so let's just say if May 1st I was going to start budgeting. I could either say May 1st, moving forward for the whole month, I am going to keep track of how much money I spend every single day. I'm going to write it down in a book. I'm going to check my online banking, whatever it is. Or I can say, okay, come May 1st, I'm going to look back at all the transactions I made in April, because I'm going to check my online banking or my mobile app, and it's going to list all the transactions that I made. So you can decide to do it either way. You also get your monthly statement. So if you have an account, no matter if it's a bank or credit union, they're going to mail you a statement or you're going to get it electronically. And that's just a printout of all the transactions that you made that month. And when you look at your statement or your online banking account, I also want you folks to look if you were assessed any fees. So fees in the way of overdraft fees. So that means that you spent more money than what was in your account and they charged you a fee for that. Or if you went to an ATM that wasn't in your credit union or your bank's network, there could be a fee. It's usually like $3 to $5 depending on your bank. Or like we talked about, some other accounts require you to have a minimum balance in your checking. And maybe you didn't have that, so they started charging you a fee. You got to look at those things to see if you were charged any of those things and factor that into your budget as well. So you're going to you can either use a budget sheet, so this is an example of it. Not all of this is relevant for college students, but it's pretty encompassing, so any adult could really use this. But there are several options. You don't have to use this one. You can make your own on Excel. You can do a paper version. They have pretty little handout ones that you can download from online. Or you can do electronic or apps. So there's a lot of different tools and products out there that you can use. But a personal suggestion of mine is you folks know individually like what works best for you. So like when I was in high school and college, I always had a planner. I wrote everything down. So doing a manual budget wasn't a big deal for me. However, I know some other people that's a little bit more challenging. So they opted for something that's automated. So you can look at your bank or credit union, or there are other sites like mint.com out there that automate the budgeting process for you. And what I mean by that is you hook it up to your account. So let's say like with HFS, we have a budgeting tool that every time you make a purchase, it categorizes it for you. So it says, Ashley spent $5 at Starbucks today. And then it puts it in my eating out budget section. And at the end of the month, I can go and look at this chart and it tells me Ashley spent $500 eating out this month. And my goal was to spend $250. So it's a really nice visual way for you to see what you're actually spending. And the other thing is like, it doesn't lie, okay? Like you cannot talk your way out of it because it automatically does it for you, which is helpful because it forces you to be really honest and transparent on how you spend your money, which is difficult for some people. So just to kind of recap, we said you can keep a notebook or just keep a list of all the purchases that you made in a month. Check your statement to make sure that you are not being assessed fees, or if you are, then make sure that's in your budget. And then overdraft fees, that's a sign that maybe you really do need to look at your budget and make sure that you're spending less money than you're actually making. the budget worksheets, there's plenty online that you can use, or you can find a web-based one if that works better for you. There's tons of financial calculators out there if you need to figure out how much money you need to save. So if you're still in that step where you're figuring out what your goals are, then there's savings goals calculators on there, online, and you can put in how much you want to save, how many months you have, and then it'll break it up for you on how much you need to save every month for that. And then the last thing is, you really need to talk to your financial institution if you have questions. If it doesn't quite make sense, or if there's a fee on your account that you don't understand, ask them. Especially when you're with a credit union, part of our philosophy is financial education. So we have some members that will call us, or they'll come in and ask to speak to somebody. And it's part of our job to really help you along in this process. So definitely, if you have questions, be sure to reach out to somebody. So before I move on to credit, any questions about budgeting? I know it was a lot.
Let's see. So Aaron asks, so Aaron's Joey's counterpart and works along with her. His question is, do you still put health insurance into your budget if it comes automatically out of your paycheck?
I think you can do it either way. So it depends on how you're breaking up your budget. If you put in your income as the number already taken out, with the medical insurance, then you can just leave that out. But if you're taking the actual money that's your paycheck, like what you're earning, then add insurance as another line item. Does that make sense?
Well, and I would say, if you're trying to track your expenses, I would include that health insurance in there, because although you're not seeing it come out when you get your paycheck, it's already gone. It's still an expense that you have. So I would make sure to track that when you're adding up your expenses. But if you're using the number as far as how much you have left to spend every month, don't worry about taking that out. It's already done.
If you're looking at the overall picture, then definitely.
Okay, and then so for the high school students and seniors that we have tuned in, is there anything that you recommend right now that they automatically start saving for, as they're kind of thinking, what are some main things that they should definitely put aside money for, unexpected expenses that I guess we all kind of forgot about or had no idea about in college? I know Aaron, Mr. Aaron, he wrote college and grad. If you're planning to go to college, setting money aside for things like flying for interviews if you're going to have to interview for professional school. Things I'm thinking of is books, because you think books are free because they usually are in high school. And then you go to college and you go to your sign up packet pickup thingy, and there's all these fees that you didn't know existed. So I guess what do you guys normally see that students are like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I had to pay for that?
I think, first of all, in general, I would just recommend saving up to have an emergency fund. So if you can save up $500 to $1,000 that you can have on the side at any time for those unexpected expenses that you may forget about, it's really helpful, and it takes a lot of stress off of you when you know you have that backup. Especially if you have a car and maybe your car breaks down or something like that. It's always good to have that emergency fund. So we definitely recommend saving up for that. As far as some other expenses, I know if you're not going to be dorming on campus and you're going to rent someplace, you'll need a deposit to put down, and that can be fairly large sometimes. So that's something to think about.
It's usually your first and last month's rent. So on the Big Island, that could be $1,000 for 1 month's rent. So if you're doing first and last, that's $2,000 that you have to come up front in order to even get the house. So that's something.
Yeah. Trying to think of.
Even parking passes. Yeah. If you drive to school, then you have to pay that.
And you
I
have to
think the
pay it
goal,
all up front also. They don't let
that's,
you put it on hold for later.
yeah, we don't have payment plans, for those kinds of,
Yeah. Yeah, those
in
are all the
general though,
difficult ones.
yeah, I think the emergency fund though, as long as, and it can be used for anything, but that's what it's for. It's for those unexpected expenses that you didn't think of. At least you have something.
Nice. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to talk about credit and credit cards really briefly because that's going to be our whole session tomorrow. So in case anybody's not attending that one, we'll just do a quick highlight for you here. So your credit. So when you're in school, right, you get grades to attend all your classes, and that's basically how well you did in class. But when you're an adult, you don't have that. You have your credit score. And basically, it's a score, it's a number that can either be 0 or it can range from 300 to 850. And that basically shows how responsible you are with your money. Okay? Everybody starts off with a 0 credit score, and that just means you don't have one. And then as you borrow money and you have bills and you pay them, then your score can go up or down. And how this affects you is a lot of people don't think, well, a lot of people think that credit is just used when you need to borrow money. So if you need to buy a car, a new car could be $20, $30, even $40,000. And if you didn't have enough time to save up that much money, a lot of people have to turn to loans. That, some people do auto loans, some people don't. But the one that, I think almost everybody will touch for is a mortgage. So if you get to the point later on in life when you want to own your own home, those bills can be, I'm not sure what it is in Oahu, but for here it can be $150,000 to $450,000. And a lot of people don't have that kind of money saved up, so they need a mortgage loan for that. And that's usually what people think of when they think of their credit score, but what they don't think of is when you want to just rent a home. So if you're in college, you're not dorming, you have to go find an apartment or a house to rent with roommates. Those people that you're renting from is your landlord. They will probably ask to pull your credit. And the reason why they do that is because they want to make sure that you're going to pay them every month. The other thing that some people don't think about, and it depends on what job you go into, but depending on your career path, a job may actually pull your credit as well. So Jessica and I work at a bank or credit union, and they pull our credit before we're allowed to move through the application process. So just those things people usually don't think of, but it is important for all adults to be aware of. So credit cards, we already covered our loans, and that's usually the first place that credit touches people. If you are turning 18, usually you will start receiving a whole bunch of junk mail that says that you are pre-approved for a credit card or a loan, and it's like $10,000. All you gotta do is sign here, send it back, and we'll send you your card. Okay? Do not do that. Shred them. Or if you do look at them, you really gotta look at the fine print and understand what kind of fees are associated with it and what kind of costs. And we'll go through that tomorrow. But just really quickly, there are two types of credit cards out there. One is a secured credit card, which means that there are funds in usually your savings account that the credit union or bank will freeze. So let's say they freeze $500. They'll then in turn give me a credit card that has a $500 limit. So I can spend up to $500, and that's how all I can spend. And usually we see this being very helpful for like students just starting out, um, or people who have bad credit who are trying to rebuild credit. The one thing that I do want to really stress though is I do not recommend anybody get a credit card unless they can be responsible with it. And actually, if you're a student in high school, you can't get one yet. Um, but a lot of people can get themselves into trouble if they can't be, what do you say, like, you can't be responsible with your spending. If you can't trust yourself to be restraintful and you're just going to go and spend, do not even go near a credit card. Use the debit card. That's the other alternative. But if you feel that you can be responsible, it is a helpful tool because you can use it for emergency situations. If you're going to college and maybe you're going away and something happens at home that you need to come home for and you need to buy a plane ticket, those plane tickets could be, $800 to $1,000. If you don't have that saved in your emergency fund, a credit card would be used for that. But I do not recommend it for anybody who cannot be responsible with it. That's a secured credit card. You have a certain amount of money. It's frozen in your account. It's less risky for the credit union or bank to give you that credit card because if you don't pay, they'll just take the money out of your savings. It's still not a good thing to do that, but it's a little bit less of a risk. So usually that's where you see people starting out with. And then the unsecured credit card is basically there's no funds frozen. It's just there for you to use. But usually you can't get those until you have established some kind of credit.
Real quick, if anybody is thinking about going the secured credit card route, I know we were just talking about what kinds of things to save money for. So I would think about this ahead of time. Have maybe $500 saved on the side so that you can open a secured credit card for $500 and not have to worry about needing that money. You already have it aside for that secured credit card. So just something to think about.
And that's money that you're not allowed to touch either. So you have to be okay with not having access to it. What I have on credit and more to come tomorrow.
We also wanted to talk about fraud and identity theft real quick because it is something that's really present in society today. I know all of us have probably heard about these kinds of scams or somebody that we know having money stolen from them. So we just want to go over a few tips or things to look out for. So first off, you want to make sure you're always monitoring your account because a lot of times if someone gets access to a card, like a debit card or to your account or your credit card, they're going to start by making really small purchases that you may not notice if you're looking in online banking or something like that. So you always want to look at your account to make sure you're not seeing anything that you don't recognize that you spent. And one of the ways that you can do this too is to set up alerts. So if you have, for us, our online banking system, you can set up alerts. So I can say if a transaction over, and for me, I just put like $1 or something, clears my account, notify me, and I can get a text message. So basically, I track my spending by using alerts. So I'll get a text message every time something gets processed that comes out of my account. And if I see something I don't recognize, I know right away instead of waiting until I go in to look. If you don't use online banking or it doesn't have alerts, you can always check your statements, your monthly statements as well. Make sure to go through line by line and just make sure that you recognize the transactions that are there. And then sometimes fraud or identity theft comes in the way of your credit report or your credit score. If they use your information, your social security number, your name to apply for credit, and you won't know unless you pull your credit report and check for any accounts listed there that you don't know of. There is a site, annualcreditreport.com, that you can pull a credit report once a quarter for free. So don't go to any sites that you have to pay. There are free options. And you can look at your credit report and we recommend doing that once a quarter and making sure that everything there is yours and that nobody has used your name or your signature to apply for credit. And then also be aware of some common scams. So we listed a few here. And the first one, gift card scams, actually happened to my husband at the end of last year. So I just wanted to share that one real quick. He had been at his job for a little over a year, and he got an email from what he thought was his boss. And now he works for a statewide company. So the boss or the owner of the company is on a different island. And the owner was asking him, you know, we have these people coming to visit. Can you go out and buy gift cards? We need $1,000 worth of gift cards. When you have them, you know, send us a picture of the number on the card and the code that you need to access it so that we can use them. And so when they do these kinds of things, they use somebody in a position of power. So of course he's thinking, okay, this is the owner of the company. He's asking me to do him this favor. I got to go out and do this. But luckily he called me. And when he started telling me the things that they were asking for, it was kind of a red flag for me. So I told him, you know, call the owner, call somebody on Oahu and ask them, did he send this email? And it turns out he didn't. So these were scammers who had impersonated his boss, had an email address that was similar to his, and if he had sent them the picture of those gift cards, they would have just drained the funds and my husband would have been out $1,000. So in that kind of situation, you have to think about what they're asking you to do and like, does that sound fishy? Why would they need that? It does happen, and some people fall for it, and it's scary because you're out a lot of money. And then that kind of moves into phishing emails and texts. So my husband had gotten an email, and in the case of emails, you always want to look for, a lot of times there will be spelling errors or grammatical errors. Look at the email address. Does it match what they've emailed you from before? Does the tone of the email sound like the person that you normally hear from if they're impersonating somebody that you know? If they're asking you to click on a link, don't click on it. A lot of times if you hover over the link, a little box will pop up and tell you the actual link that you're visiting, and sometimes it's something totally different. And they could be introducing like spyware or something onto your computer, so you don't want to click on links that you don't know. And the same thing for text messages. I know I get scam text messages probably once a week now, and all of them have links that they're trying to get you to click on to go someplace outside of the message, and they might ask you for personal information, which you definitely don't want to give them. And then I'm sure some of you have seen the social media quizzes. So you might see your friends or family post where it's a bunch of questions like, what was your first car? What was your favorite color, your mom's maiden name, or the different last names in your family. I've seen that one. But what people don't realize is these are common, what you call challenge questions. So if you're setting up an account somewhere and they'll ask you these questions that you have to answer, so that if you forget your password, they're going to ask you the question, and if you have the right answer, then you can reset your password. So how easy is it for somebody to just look on your social media profile and they can find an answer to your challenge question just based off of what you thought was a fun game? So those are actually not smart to participate in. If you see those, I would stay away from them.
Especially if your profile is public.
Yes. And then also what are called like online marketplace scams. So we're thinking of places like Craigslist or even Facebook Marketplace. You'll see where if, say you're trying to sell something and somebody responds and they tell you, I'll send you a check. And they send you a check for an amount more than what they're purchasing. So say they're buying something for $1,000. They send you a check for $2,000 and say, oh, cash the check, but send me back $1,000. Most cases, those checks are not good, and it will bounce, and you will end up being out for all of the funds that you send back to them. So anytime you see something like that, it's not a good idea. You can actually take it to your institution and ask them if you're not sure. Do you think this is okay? Like, does this look fraudulent? And we're aware of common scams, so we can usually look at it and tell you if we think it's real or not. And then just real quick, when I was talking about links and when you click out and they'll ask for your information, we always tell people to never share your account number, never share your passwords, especially to things like online banking. Never share your social security number. All of those are personal to you, and nobody should be asking you for them, especially not through an email or over the phone, unless you're expecting it from somebody. But most times, we would recommend not sharing that information.
Something that's relevant, I guess, for like right now is, the government is issuing the stimulus money, and a common scam that we're seeing, and a lot of times scammers, they go off of like seasonality. So right now, that's the big thing that's happening. Everybody's aware of it. So there are scammers out there that take advantage of that kind of situation, and what they're doing is kind of saying like, oh, we're from the IRS, but we can get you your money quicker if you give me your social security number, your date of birth, all of these things, and we'll get you your money quicker. No. So you need to be really aware of, what the process is, and when in doubt, just hang up the phone. I always say just hang up. And you can go directly to the source. So in this case, it would be go directly to the IRS website, find out what the process is, and you'll see that they are not contacting you to, confirm your information or to do any of that. They're just sending you your money. So in that case, that would have been a fraudulent person maybe trying to go into your account and then maybe switch the money from going into your checking account into theirs. It happens a lot with tax time as well. So just kind of be aware of those situations. If anything doesn't feel right, hang up the phone. If it was legitimate, it's fine. You can call them back. But definitely be aware, because it happens so frequently now, and unfortunately, they do target the elders. So if you have grandparents out there or your parents, it's good to just kind of bring it up. And I do that with my mom and my grandpa and stuff like that. So just be aware. Okay. So before we move on, I guess, and we ask for any other questions, we did get a few that you folks had asked. The first one was, what is the biggest tip for high schoolers wanting to save enough for college? And I think we kind of talked about that already, but the main thing is you got to have income coming in. You got to have some kind of money, right? Even if it's part-time job, that's totally fine. And if you're getting a part-time job just to save for college, realistically, you're not going to be able to pay for your entire schooling with that money. But that is enough money to start an emergency fund, right? So that you can have that good nest egg for your security deposit, or if you've got to rent, or your book, or, actually, even if you are going through a college program that requires you to have certain materials, like my cousin's going into carpentry, and he needs to have tools. He needs to buy that on his own, so you're going to need that kind of money. But we do highly stress scholarships. So my suggestion is to apply for absolutely everything that you can. It doesn't hurt to try. Apply with through your financial aid office, the FAFSA, and then you can see if you can get scholarships from the school. Some of them even have tuition waivers. So like I went to UH Hilo here, and just by doing the FAFSA, I qualified for a little bit of a tuition waiver. You can get federal loans from there. And actually a quick tip about loans. As a financial institution, we have several options for students. We have student loans, we have personal loans, credit cards, obviously those kinds of things to help college students. However, we always suggest that the student takes out the federal loans that come through the financial aid office before they start looking at other options outside. So there's a couple reasons for that. The first one is you have more flexibility with repayment when you get the federal loans, because usually you don't have to start paying those back until after you graduate or some other time. You have it's called deferment period. But if you go outside and you go to a bank and you get what's called a private loan, you have to start paying those back as soon as you get the money. And then when you're a college student, that's not always feasible. So that reason, and then usually the rates are a little bit lower. So we do suggest that you exhaust all of your options with your financial aid office first before you start going and looking outside.
Okay, the second question we got was regarding how to handle budgeting for college roommates. So, I mean, basically with what we talked about, we would suggest that, you and your roommates sit down and work on a budget for all of the household expenses, figure out what it will cost you, or what you think it will cost you every month. And how you folks split that up will always depend on what you guys are comfortable with. But what we see most often is roommates will split the household bills, so like the rent, utilities, things like that. But then they will use their own funds and purchase their own groceries and toiletries and whatever they need for themselves personally. And that seems to work for a lot of people. But if not, I know grocery shopping was the example that we had seen in the question. Say, for example, you decide to take on the grocery shopping for the house, then maybe somebody else covers the electric and the water bill or something, so that it kind of evens out into what you folks are spending, so that it's fair if that's what you folks decide to do. But always start with the budget to see what you'll need to spend for the household. And then the last question we had gotten was regarding, I guess this person was starting medical school and asking if they should open a Roth IRA or focus on living expenses and student loans first. So first of all, definitely make sure that living expenses are taken care of. So you want to make sure you're okay, your rent or your mortgage is getting paid, your utilities are getting paid. So none of that gets you into trouble. So start with a budget and see. So after all of those expenses are paid, how much money do you have left over? And now with that money that you have left over, you could split that possibly and put some towards your loans and some towards the Roth IRA. I know you.
Yeah, so with the loans, if you're a medical student, I would just assume that you will have loans that aren't just through financial aid. You're going to probably need extra that you're getting from like a private student loan or through a bank or a credit union or something like that. And like I mentioned, those outside loans, as soon as you get the money, you have to start repaying them. And interest starts accruing as soon as you get the money too. So if you have that extra funds after you budget, I would, include those payments in your budget as well. So paying the interest that's accruing on those loans, and then any loan payments that you have to make because it's a private loan. I would take a look at those two and make that a priority as well. And you probably won't pay off the whole thing, but at least by the time you graduate, instead of paying back, $10,000 plus interest, you only have $10,000 to pay back. It's a lesser amount, if that makes sense.
Do we have any other questions?
Let's see. So we have a question. I don't know if you guys addressed it. When your bank institution calls and asks for information, do you recommend you hang up and call them back before giving any info? Is that a common practice that you guys call and ask for information? I don't think it is, but it might be another scam tactic.
Right, that's definitely a scam tactic that we've seen and heard happening to people. If somebody says they're your financial institution and they're asking for sensitive info, definitely hang up and call your institution directly. Don't hit redial. Just find their number on their website and call them directly and ask if they had called you and contacted you, because we have that information already. We have your social, we have your account number. We're not going to ask you for that. So yeah, definitely, that's a good question. I would hang up and call them directly.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Students that are on, do you have any last questions for Jessica and Ashley? And if you thought of more questions during this session and you're joining us tomorrow, send your questions to Miss Joey and we'll make sure that they get answered. Yeah, nothing yet. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Yes.
Ashley.
All right. So thank you so much, Jessica and Ashley. I think even Joey and myself learned a lot too because we didn't have this available when we were going through high school. So I can definitely say for myself, I made a lot of like the mistakes, and like learned on the fly as I went through college, and I'm now a working adult. But this was definitely really helpful. And for students online, it's a lot of information to digest, but it's good to just start thinking about as you guys move forward into the next season or the next phase of your life. So Miss Joey will be sending out tomorrow's information for you folks to sign up, and we're excited to have you guys back tomorrow. And thank you again for a really thorough and informative presentation today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. We'll send over a copy of the presentation, and it has our contact info at the end in case anybody has questions and wants to contact us directly.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.